The 1980s were bursting with genius, at least on paper. Engineers dreamed big radical cab designs, futuristic transmissions, electronic controls no farmer had ever seen before. These tractor ideas were brilliant, innovative, and years ahead of the competition. But when they finally reached the fields, they flopped hard. Some were too complex, some were too fragile, and some were simply solutions to problems nobody had. Get ready, because these are the 10 brilliant 1980s tractor ideas that became massive failures. Number 1. John Deere 4450. When John Deere introduced the 4450 in 1983, it was meant to symbolize the future of farming technology. Deere was already famous for reliability, but now they wanted to add sophistication. This tractor came equipped with an early version of Deere's ComputerTrack digital dashboard, a system that monitored PTO load, slip percentage, engine performance, fuel efficiency, and even acres worked. For the 1980s, this was groundbreaking. No other tractor in North America had this level of electronic intelligence. Deere imagined a world where farmers used data to make every pass more efficient. The problem was simple. 1980s electronics were not built for real farming. Dust sneaked into the panels. Cold weather caused screens to flicker. Moisture shut down sensors. The display was notorious for going blank in the middle of field work, often causing the tractor to disable PTO or hydraulic functions unnecessarily. Farmers hated that a tiny electronic glitch could shut down a perfectly functional mechanical tractor. Many dealers ended up disabling the digital systems completely to keep customers happy. Another big issue was maintenance. ComputerTrack components were expensive and far too complicated for the average farmer to repair. Even dealerships with trained mechanics lacked proper diagnostic tools because such technology barely existed. When a sensor failed, the whole system behaved unpredictably. Farmers felt the dashboard was smarter than they were, but in an annoying, unreliable way, not a helpful one. The 4450 became a good tractor mechanically, but its futuristic dashboard was so frustrating that it overshadowed its strengths. Deere's idea was brilliant, but the world wasn't ready for computer-controlled tractors in 1983. Number 2. Deutz-Fahr Intrac 2003. The Deutz-Fahr Intrac 2003 remains one of the most radical tractor designs ever sold. Its bold cab-forward layout placed the operator right above the front axle, giving a panoramic view of the field and front-mounted implements. This was revolutionary because European farmers often relied heavily on front attachments. Deutz engineers believed that by moving the cab to the front, operators would gain unmatched control, accuracy, and comfort, almost like driving a modern telehandler, decades before such machines became common. In theory, the Intrac was brilliant. In practice, it was a disaster. The first major issue was weight distribution. With the engine positioned behind the cab, the tractor was poorly balanced, especially during heavy towing. Farmers accidentally lifted the front end off the ground while pulling loaded trailers. On slopes, the tractor felt unstable and tippy, causing many to lose confidence in the design. Comfort also failed badly. Sitting at the very front meant the driver absorbed every bump and vibration directly. Noise levels were high because the cab had little protection from wind and road contact. Heat from the engine traveled forward, making the cab warm under heavy workloads. And visibility, though excellent, came at the cost of feeling dangerously exposed. Maintenance was another headache. The engine's rear placement made repairs extremely difficult. Changing belts, accessing the injection pump, or working on hydraulics required removing panels and even lifting major components. Dealers hated servicing the Intrac, and farmers hated paying those bills. By the early 1990s, Deutz-Fahr quietly phased out the Intrac series. It was a machine full of futuristic brilliance, but it simply didn't meet the demands of real farming. Number 3. Case IH 1896-2096. Case IH's 1896 and 2096 tractors came at a turning point in agricultural technology. The company wanted to modernize its tractor lineup by integrating early electronic control systems. These models featured digital monitoring, an electronic PTO switch, and a primitive computer-assisted engine management unit. At the time, these features looked like the next great leap forward for American farming. But the electronic systems were the tractor's downfall. The electronic PTO was the biggest failure. Instead of a simple mechanical lever, Case IH replaced the PTO engagement with a sensitive electric switch. When the circuitry was exposed to moisture, something impossible to avoid in farming, it would glitch, cut out mid-operation, or refuse to engage altogether. Imagine baling hay or running a forage wagon and having the PTO suddenly shut off. That happened frequently, and it enraged farmers. The tractors also suffered from faulty sensors. Temperature, hydraulic pressure, and RPM sensors often misread data, forcing the tractor into protection mode, which limited power and slowed down hydraulics. Farmers working under tight schedules could not afford these interruptions. Worse, dealers lacked proper diagnostic equipment, so repairs were slow, expensive, and often incorrect. Electronics in the 80s simply weren't durable. Wires corroded, connectors loosened, and moisture infiltrated control boxes. The tractors were mechanically strong, classic Case reliability, but the digital systems completely destroyed their reputation. Case IH ultimately learned the hard way that electronic innovation must be tested for years before field release. The 1896 and 2096 were brilliant machines, ruined by early tech that wasn't ready. Number 4. Ford TW35 Series 1. The Ford TW35 Series 1 is often remembered as one of the most problematic high-horsepower tractors Ford ever built. Ford engineers were trying to keep up with rising horsepower demands, so they introduced a new power boost system. This innovation temporarily increased engine power when the PTO or hydraulics needed extra muscle. It was a forward-thinking idea, something modern tractors use successfully. But the 401 diesel engine in the TW35 simply wasn't designed for such stress. The power boost system routinely pushed the engine beyond safe heat and pressure levels. The tractor quickly became notorious for overheating, blown head gaskets, cracked cylinder heads, boiled coolant, weakened pistons and rings. The cooling system was not upgraded to handle the extra heat. Under heavy PTO loads, hay chopping, slurry tanking, big baler work, the temperature could skyrocket within minutes. Many tractors suffered catastrophic engine failure long before reaching normal life expectancy. Fuel injection problems added to the disaster. The Bosch pump struggled to maintain smooth fueling when the power boost system kicked in, often causing pre-ignition, rough running, and smoky exhaust. Farmers quickly lost trust. Many disabled the power boost entirely, essentially turning the TW35 into a less efficient version of the older TW30. Ford later corrected many issues in the Series 2 models, but the damage to the tractor's reputation was already done. The TW35 is a perfect example of a brilliant idea ruined by poor execution. The concept was decades ahead of its time, but the engine simply couldn't survive the demands of modern horsepower enhancement. Number 5. Fiat 18090 Tektronic Prototype. The Fiat 18090 is a legendary tractor, especially in Europe, known for its power and toughness. But many people don't know that Fiat also experimented with a highly advanced version in the 1980s, the 1890 Tektronic, an early attempt at a semi-CVT, continuously variable transmission, long before the technology became reliable. This experimental system used an electronically controlled hydrostatic variator to provide smooth, gearless acceleration. The idea was brilliant: maintain perfect engine RPM while adjusting ground speed seamlessly. In concept, it could outperform traditional gearboxes completely. But the 1980s weren't ready for CVT. The Tektronic transmission suffered from severe overheating, especially under heavy traction work like plowing or deep tillage. The hydraulic variator generated excessive heat, quickly breaking down hydraulic oil and burning seals. Once the oil thinned, the variator began slipping. Many testers reported sudden, dangerous loss of traction when pulling implements. The electronics were equally unreliable. Sensors misread shaft speeds, causing the system to jerk violently or stall. The control unit struggled to coordinate engine RPM with wheel speed, making the tractor unpredictable. Fiat engineers also discovered that servicing the Tektronic transmission required tools and knowledge that dealerships simply didn't have. Rebuilding the variator was so expensive that it was uneconomical even as a warranty repair. As a result, Fiat cancelled the project before mass production. The few prototypes that existed were quietly scrapped or hidden away. The Tektronic 180/90 was a brilliant engineering dream, but it was at least 20 years ahead of its time. Number 6. Same Hercules 160. Same had always been proud of its air-cooled engines. They were simple, reliable, lightweight, and nearly impossible to freeze in winter. For decades, these engines worked beautifully in small and mid-sized tractors. But in the 1980s, Same decided to push their air-cooling philosophy to the extreme with the Same Hercules 160, a massive 6-cylinder air-cooled monster. On paper, it was an incredible idea. No radiator meant no coolant leaks, no frozen water pumps, and fewer breakdowns. Air-cooled engines also warmed up quickly, making them ideal for cold climates. Same believed they could challenge high-horsepower water-cooled machines from Fiat, Ford, and John Deere. But the real world crushed the dream. The biggest problem was heat. Air-cooled technology simply couldn't scale to such high horsepower. When pulling plows, cultivators, or trailers uphill, the Hercules engine reached dangerously high temperatures. Farmers reported the cylinder heads glowing, oil thinning, and performance dropping sharply. Dust clogged the cooling fins so quickly that operators had to stop multiple times a day just to clean them. Noise was another issue. The Hercules 16 was extremely loud, even inside the cab. Farmers joked it sounded like a jet engine or a giant air compressor. Long hours became exhausting. Then came durability problems. Excessive heat warped heads, cracked cylinders, and seized pistons. Many engines failed long before reaching 3,000 hours, a disaster for a premium tractor. Same eventually realized the truth. Air cooling had its limits. The Hercules 160 pushed beyond those limits and paid the price. A brilliant mechanical idea. Yes, but way too ambitious for real farming. Number 7. Renault 145/14TX Electronique. The Renault 145/14TX Electronique was France's attempt to leap into the future of tractor design during the mid-1980s. Renault wanted to bring automotive-style sophistication into farming, so they packed this tractor with advanced systems that looked far beyond their time. It featured electronic hydraulic lift control, digital engine management, electronic PTO engagement, early diagnostic check systems, dashboard warning computers. This was mind-blowing technology for 1984. Renault truly believed they were building the tractor of tomorrow. But farmers absolutely hated it. The electronics were extremely fragile. Sensors failed regularly, especially the hydraulic lift sensors, which controlled how the rear three-point system reacted to soil resistance. When these sensors glitched, as they often did, the tractor either refused to lift the implement or lifted it violently. The electronic PTO system was even more troublesome. Moisture entering the connectors caused sudden PTO disengagement in the middle of operation. Imagine mowing or baling and the PTO randomly cutting out something that happened frequently enough to terrify owners. Dealers were equally frustrated. They had almost no training on diagnosing electronic failures. Many spent hours replacing parts without solving the real problem. Customers lost trust fast. Worst of all, the Electronique version cost significantly more than the standard mechanical 145/1. Farmers saw it as over-engineered, overpriced, and unreliable. By the late 1980s, most owners were demanding conversion to mechanical controls. Renault listened. Future models returned to simpler layouts. The 145/ton TX Electronique stands today as one of the greatest technological overreaches in tractor history. Brilliant idea. Terrible timing. Number 8. White 2135 Field Boss 2. White Farm Equipment wanted to be seen as an innovation leader, and in 1982 they unveiled the White 2135 Field Boss 2 featuring the Digital Command Center. This was a highly advanced digital monitoring system that displayed wheel slip, PTO load, fuel efficiency, engine diagnostic, field productivity metrics. For an early 80s tractor, this was space-age technology. White believed they could beat John Deere's computer track by offering even more information and modern electronics. But the digital command center quickly turned into a nightmare. The display screens frequently burned out or went blank. Circuit boards were extremely sensitive to vibration, the very thing tractors experience constantly. Dust entered the modules, moisture shorted out wires, and cold weather made the system fail unpredictably. Farmers were furious because when the command center glitched, the tractor often lost PTO or hydraulic functions. The system was tied into critical controls, meaning a simple electronic failure could halt operations completely. Dealers also struggled. Diagnostic tools were rare and parts were expensive. Many repairs involved replacing entire electronic boards instead of troubleshooting individual components, which drove costs sky high. Mechanically, the white 2135 was solid, but its reputation was destroyed by electronics that simply were not designed for field abuse. The Field Boss 2 proved an important lesson. Digital features should assist the operator, not control the tractor. White learned too late, and the company eventually declined as competitors moved past them. A brilliant idea, but one of the biggest flops of the 1980s. Number 9. MB-Trac 1800 Intercooler. The MB-Trac 1800 intercooler is legendary today among collectors, but during the 1980s, it was one of the biggest commercial failures in high-horsepower tractors. Mercedes-Benz wanted to create the ultimate multifunction tractor, part truck, part loader, part farm machine. The result was a technological marvel. Four-wheel steering, central cab, high road speed, hydraulic suspension, Mercedes 6-cylinder turbo engine, dual PTO plunge front linkage, unmatched visibility. It was decades ahead of its time. But farmers saw something different. An overly complicated machine that was expensive to buy, expensive to repair, and far too delicate for everyday farming. The four-wheel steering system required constant alignment and calibration. If one sensor misread wheel position, the entire steering system behaved unpredictably. The hydraulic suspension was even worse, leaking constantly, expensive to repair, and needing frequent maintenance. Parts availability was a major problem. A simple steering cylinder could cost several times more than those on ordinary tractors. Electronics also failed regularly, especially in cold weather. The tractor felt more like a luxury machine than a rugged workhorse. Farmers wanted simplicity and toughness, not a Mercedes full of tech that cost a fortune to keep running. Sales were low, and by 1991, the MB-Trac line was discontinued entirely. Today, collectors love the 1800 intercooler because of its uniqueness. But in the 80s, it was a brilliant idea that the agricultural world simply could not accept. Number 10. Lamborghini 135 Formula. The Lamborghini 135 Formula was one of the most stylish tractors ever produced in the 1980s, designed with aerodynamic bodywork, a futuristic dashboard, and advanced hydraulics. It looked more like a concept machine than a working tractor. Lamborghini hoped to bring automotive flair and high-tech design into agriculture, offering farmers something modern, comfortable, and impressive. But the tractor failed almost immediately. First, the electronics were far too sensitive. Digital readouts and sensors malfunctioned in dusty or wet environments. The electronic lift system frequently glitched, and operators complained that the dashboard lit up with random warning signals that meant nothing. Secondly, the tractor's body panels, made from lightweight composite materials, cracked easily. Even minor bumps from loaders, stones, or trailers caused damage. Replacement panels were extremely expensive because Lamborghini produced them in small volumes. Mechanically, the engine was strong, but the transmission and electronic controls were too delicate compared to rugged competitors like Fiat, Zetor, or John Deere. Farmers needed durability, not exotic engineering. The price was the final blow. The 135 Formula cost more than similar tractors with equal horsepower, and few farmers wanted to pay a premium for flashy styling when simpler machines did the same job more reliably. While Lamborghini later improved its tractor lineup, the 135 Formula remains one of the clearest examples of a brilliant idea that simply didn't match what farmers needed. A beautiful machine, just not a practical one. These machines prove that even great ideas can fall apart when they collide with reality. But every failure pushed the industry forward, forcing engineers to rethink, redesign, and refine the tractors we rely on today. If you enjoyed uncovering these forgotten engineering misfires, hit like, subscribe, and tell me which idea shocked you the most. Thanks for watching and stick around, because the next video dives into even more bold ideas that went terribly wrong.